Chapter 9. Naya. Fragrant smoke rose around the old man's head, and the haze and the brown blanket around his shoulders made him look like a distant mountain at sunrise, despite the dimness of the candlelit room. The room itself spoke of wealth, built of marble and fine wood, and was adorned with the trappings and curios of a long life well lived. There were even some items that hinted at a life of adventure, not the least of which the old leaf-bladed short sword which hung on the wall. 2 large doors opened onto a garden courtyard, letting in the late summer breeze and carrying the fragrant scent of blooming hyacinth and windflower. Polyphemus had always seemed so large to Naya, so powerful and capable, and it was strange to her to see him so bowed with age in recent days. He clicked a small bone token onto a grid inked on a smooth, broad sheepskin. He smiled in satisfaction, before the smile was interrupted by a violent fit of coughing. Naya looked up from the gameskin with disapproval.
"Your cough is always worse when you smoke that pipe, sir."
Her brown braids were unpinned and hung around her neck and shoulders, with only a few stray locks of hair bobbing free as she looked back and forth across her formation. She was tired from her quickstone work that morning, her swim, her tense encounter with Polonus, and her damnable house chores, which she had done as fast as she possibly could have to spend time with her elderly master. She would pay dearly tomorrow for staying awake tonight. She rubbed her eyes before delicately placing a few of her own tokens, dyed a pale blue, onto the sheepskin. They were separated by a papyrus screen between 2 halves of the grid that was colorfully painted with an image of a fleet of triremes on the sea. The old man regained his composure and took a drag from his delicate clay pipe, exhaling the milky smoke. "I get no relief from this blinded cough no matter what I do, young one, so I prefer to partake in one of the last pleasures I have left, from time to time." He looked directly at her, and she met his gaze, and he clicked 2 more chits down on the board without lowering his eyes. His messy white hair and beard reminded Naya of a dandelion for a fleeting heartbeat. His hair had gotten so white so fast.
"Am I still that easy to read?"
she asked with a grin. "There are those who are easier," said Polyphemus. "But yes, you still are. At least to me." He lifted the papyrus screen that had been separating the 2 lined halves of the sheepskin and folded it gently, revealing the formations of bone tokens that each had laid. Naya's pieces were arranged in a wedge, with its tip pointed just to the right of the center of the field. She had arranged her forces into a line-breaking phalanx, loosely supported by a few scattered chits off the flanks. Unfortunately, there was no line for her to break on the other side. Polyphemus had arranged his chits into loose groupings of 2 or 3 in alternating clusters that could reinforce one another, with more clusters near the edges of the sheepskin. Naya scowled. There was a thump as Z knocked something over on the other side of the room, prowling for a moth fluttering in the corner. Neither player paid her any mind. "You first," the old man said, the barest trace of a smile forming at the bearded corners of his mouth. Naya moved a piece from the back of the wedge to the side where it could support the flank. Polyphemus retreated 2 units away from the tip of her phalanx, and she reinforced a second time. Finally, he pinched a single token from the center of his largest group and moved it to a lonely spot near the middle of the grid. "Reveal," he said, as her mind worked to understand the nature of the trap he had laid. They both flipped over the small bone squares on the skin, one at a time, in a quick, practiced motion, revealing the symbols and runes on the opposite sides. Naya had fielded an aggressive, yet reasonably traditional assembly of infantry, spearmen, and cavalry, lightly supported by archers, and an ink bonded on each flank. Polyphemus's chits, on the other hand, were organized in a bizarre constellation of small clusters of units, favoring archers, cavalry, and war dogs. The piece he had placed all alone was his lone ink bonded. Naya tried to make sense of the placements.
You've abandoned the center.
You think so, Lady Strategos? I think you will find it a harder crab to crack than you realize.
I think not. Your men are undisciplined, and their leader smokes too much, and he doesn't follow his physicus orders even though he is sick.
He sounds dashing, said Polyphemus, looking thoughtful and raising his eyebrows. I should like to sit and listen to stories of his adventures for many hours at a time.
You will find that his stories will get boring very quickly, she retorted.
At that, Polyphemus made a bemused face, just shy of a chuckle. Naya picked up the lead trio of chits at the head of a phalanx and moved them forward. They both fell silent and moved pieces in turn, one after the other, quickly and without hesitation.